Good evening to all our friends and partners in public service, all our friends and partners on Facebook and around the world. This is Reverend Dr. Aquilus Ricks, founder and president of AfriH, Africans for the Restoration of Ethics in Government. We are coming live to you on our regular Monday evening Zoom network feed. Tonight, I'm going to be doing a monologue or more of a teaching tonight on the subject Introduction to Public Administration. Introduction to Public Administration. Some time ago, I did a monologue on Intro to Public Policy, and this is another part to that will deal with public administration. Oftentimes when we talk about public policy, we talk about it in isolation. Many people who talk about public policy talk about it in isolation of public administration. In most cases, it is perceived as a completely different discipline. Although there are some instances where scholars and practitioners kind of blend the two. But oftentimes when we talk about public policy, people just generally think that it's a separate entity from public administration. But it is important, we want people to understand that public administration is a part and parcel of the whole package that comes with public policy. You cannot divorce the two. Public policy and public administration, they go together, they work hand in hand. In fact, you need to consider them as two halves to make one whole. So that it's impossible to talk public policy without bringing public administration into it. And it's impossible to talk public administration without bringing public policy into the conversation. The two have to go together. They go together in the whole context of governance, in the whole context of administration. They work hand in hand. You cannot separate the two. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We're going to be looking at this aspect of public administration, even as we consider the bigger picture of public policy. Public policy, just to recap, when we talked the last time, we mentioned that public policy referred to courses of action that government takes to address social needs, economic needs, environmental needs, health needs of its citizens. So with public policy, government come with ideas how to address things that's impacting society and impacting culture to better the life of her citizens. Well, public administration, on the other hand, is the implementation of those courses of action. So on the one hand, government sit down, the policy analysts or the policy, managers, policy makers sit down and they devise an idea, plan of a course of action, how we address these needs impacting our community, impacting our society. And then they come up with this litany of ideas and package into what we call public policy. And then the second phase of that go into effect where they begin to implement these courses of actions that they have come up with. And that's the whole essence of public administration. It is the implementation of governmental policies, So while public policy come up with ideas and a plan, public administration comes up with the enforcement of those ideas and the enforcement of those plans. So in public policy, therefore, we are looking more closely at how government institutions are set up to enforce policies. First of all, do we have the institutions set up to enforce policies? So we look at the government agencies or the government institutions. When we talk about institutions, just to narrow it down, we are also referring to agencies, or what we call in some instances ministries or departments, okay, within a governmental structure. Those are all governmental institutions responsible for the implementation of various policies that government come up with. Now, when we think about public administration, there are a few questions that we need to ask ourselves. Okay, when you think about implementing public policies as an administration, you think about, for example, do we have the necessary agency or the necessary institution set up to handle these policies? So you've done the work, you have the dialogue, you have the conversation, you have documented what kind of policy you want to put in place. Then the next question is, do we have the necessary institutions, whereby we can enforce, these policies that we have come up with? I mean, are the policies given to the appropriate, appropriate institution? So sometimes you have situation whereby, you have all these institutions, and you examine, you notice that we do not have the institution or the agency that can handle this policy. So in other words, we need to create a new agency for this policy. Or sometimes you have all these agencies, but you got to determine which agency is appropriate for the implementation of this and this of such policy that you have approved as a government. I mean, the last thing you want, for example, you don't want to take something that deals with EPA, and give it to the health ministry or the health agency or the health department. That'll be a disconnect. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. Even though EPA deals with environmental, but it doesn't, in some shape or form, it affects the health of people. But that's a completely different setup when it comes to implementation than taking it and saying, what, let's just give it to the health ministry, because since the environment affects people's health, so it must go to the health ministry. That would be appropriating this policy into a department that is not set up for that policy to be implemented. Okay, so you ask yourself these questions: do we have the institution or the agency, set up for these policies, or do we have, of all the agencies we have set up, what is the appropriate agency that we can assign this policy to, that it will be effectively implemented, in our nation, in our communities? One practical example of this is what we saw happen in the U.S. right after 9/11. After 9/11, we know when 9/11 took place, the Twin Tower in New York were destroyed, and there were lots of lives that were lost. And the U.S. government had, a dialogue and conversations, how to prevent such a thing from occurring again. How to prevent. Now there's so many agencies the U.S. government has, but after so many discussions and conversation, all of a sudden we heard about the establishment of the Department of Homeland Security. So which means that to address the specific need of preserving the homeland from terror attacks, they decided that policy could not be assigned to an existing agency or an existing department. There has to be the creation of a brand new department exclusive exclusively designed to handle this policy and to implement this policy to the satisfaction of the American people. So up came Department of Homeland Security, okay, to address that. And that's the whole essence we're saying here, that sometimes that you would design a policy, and as you look into your setup, into your structure, you realize that the policy cannot be implemented within the existing structure. It has to be implemented within a uniquely designed setup for itself. Okay, so Homeland Security was birthed, okay, based on the setup, that was determined for the American people. Again, looking at the entire problem of protecting homeland. Homeland Security Department was designed and set up for that purpose. So you ask yourself this question, when you talk about administration, public administration. Do we have the institutions, or is it an existing institution that we need to assign it to implement those policies? To implement those policies. Now, next question you're going to look at is that, the existing agency or whatever agency we have created, do they understand the rules of engagement in addressing these policies? Do they understand the rules of engagement in addressing these policies? Is the language clear in the policy for these agencies to just read the language and know what to do and know exactly what we want them to do and what is to be accomplished as they implement these policies? Are the expectations, clear within these setup, within these policies, for the agency to just get the document, read the policy, and understand, what, we have this setup here, we have all these check marks done that we cannot fully carry out this policy. So you ask yourself these questions as you think about public administration. First, you look at the agency is a setup. Is the language in the policy clear enough that they understand what is expected of them to implement? Another thing you want to look at when you talk about public administration, you want to also look at staffing needs. You look at staffing, what staffing levels are appropriate for an efficient and effective, implementation of these policies? Do we have enough? Do we have enough staff to carry out these policies? Do we have enough, manpower? Do we need to hire more people? Do we need to employ more people? Do we need more agents in the field? Do we need more employees? I mean, do we need more contractors? You have to look at the staffing needs when it comes to administration, because you have the policy on paper, but having it on paper is completely different than putting it into effect, they're making it become alive. So you look at your staffing needs. Do we have enough staff? Do we have enough staff on the ground to implement these policies? Another question that should be considered, the budgetary needs. To fully execute this policy. I mean, what kind of budget are we looking at? In terms of salaries, in terms of equipment, inventory, etc. You examine, you carry out this entire process where you look at the budgetary needs to implement these policies, on the administrative level. When it comes to services, you want to find out also, do people in the community, our citizens, do they have access to these services? Are the services affordable? So these are some of the things that you kind of think about, when you talk about public administration. It's not just sitting down and saying, let's just get all these ideas and put it on the paper. But when you look at making these ideas become alive, putting them into effect, give me feet to these policies. There's a litany of questions that you have to go through and check to make sure that you have everything it takes, that this policy that you have placed on paper can be implemented in the community. It can be placed into effect. All right. So those are some essential things that we need to think about when we contemplate on the whole idea about public administration. Now, the next question I want to ask here is why is public administration important? Why is public administration important? Why is a simple definition is this, a simple reason is this, because the public want to see results that are tangible. That's the whole essence of public administration. The citizens, the public deserve to see results that are tangible. I mean, they elected the government, they have leaders in place, for a reason, to better their lives, to improve the living condition. And, to ensure that goods and services are moved around clearly and efficiently, and people have access to clear drinking water and have access to roads and to do business and to do transactions. There's a strong supply chain that goods and services can move up. I mean, the public wants to see results. They want to see results of the decision government is making on their behalf. Because don't get me wrong, like government is being paid, by taxes for citizens. You serve the interests of the citizens. That's why it's called public service. So they expect to see results of the policies that you have come up with. All right. There are expectations from the public that appropriate oversight of these agencies has to be done to ensure the public benefits from the policies. Okay, that's what makes public administration important. Public has expectations. Yeah, you read the policy, you made the speeches, they've heard all those good things. So now the expectation that, okay, what we've heard, we are waiting now to see these things happen. We're waiting now to see these things being done. We're waiting to see the practical and tangible results that were spoken of during the speech. Or that would explain, when the policy would explain to us, we want to see these tangible results. So we want to ensure that the public benefits from it. So you see, the public is looking at administration and government, to be beneficiaries of these policies. That's what makes public administration important. Now we can have all these policies and all these expectations and all these reasons, that sounds good in speeches and on paper, but until the public see these things happening in a tangible way, results, until they see the result actually taking place, there is no use. It's no use. It's not benefiting them. It's not benefiting them. Public administration wants to ensure that the policies that we talked about, or that we write down, that we form, benefits the citizenry in practical ways, by tangible result that community, the citizens can see, and that's measurable. All right. Now, so just to recap, there are multi layers of public administration. There are multi layers of public administration. We talk about the creation of the agencies to handle these policies. Okay. Then you also look at the regulation of these agencies. So it's one to say, you know what, I have the agencies set up to handle things concerning finance. We have the finance ministry. Okay, that's good. Okay, but what about regulation? We have regulations in place, to ensure that these agencies carry out the objectives of the policies. Are these agencies being regulated on a daily basis? To ensure that public trust in these agencies are strong and is increasing. What about reports? Are there reports being provided by these agencies that would demonstrate transparency, that would show the public what they are doing, what they are accomplishing? Because the public is not in the offices and to see what happened behind the scenes, all that's happening. But as these agencies produce reports that is public record that people can see and read, then we get to understand that these agencies are carrying out their assigned work. They are carrying what is expected of them in implementing these policies. Okay. Also, when you talk about public administration, you're looking at the whole idea of evaluation and audit, that will help these agencies improve the services, improve, what are being trusted to them to serve communities, to serve the citizens. So, so when you talk about public administration, it's a litany of things, a lot of steps in the process, to take policy from the paper and make it real and make it alive, so to speak, in the community. All these things give us a picture of what public administration is about, what it entails. It's not a simple process. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It takes management, it takes involvement, it takes engagement to take a policy from paper into reality, and the governmental sector is set up in a way that through public administration that can be possible. Now, within the African context, because our concern is pretty much to help Africa in some shape or form, to help Africa understand how she can better improve the conditions of her citizens. So we come alongside Africa to do that. So within the African context, it's interesting because as we examine and look at Africa, we've determined that the challenge that Africa has is of two parts. One is first and foremost looking at policy. Do we have good policy makers? Do we have people put together policies, that can be implemented? Okay, so we see that now it's not a broad, accusation, because we know there are some countries in Africa that is doing better than others in terms of policy formation and policy implementation. But generally, we want to say this, that there's a challenge in the era of formulating policies, good public policies. But then on the second hand, we see there's also a challenge when it comes to carrying out these policies, the administrative part of these policies. We lack good administrative systems to implement policies in Africa. African governments, that as you speak to leaders of Africa, as you listen to them giving speeches, you see that the intentions are good. They say all the right thing. They really want to see that people live, good quality life. They really want to see good infrastructure set up. I mean, we hear the speeches, we see, we listen to their heart when they talk, but practically, speeches and talking, do not have weight if there is no implementation that follows them. If there's no implementation that follow them, and so as we look in Africa, we see some of the challenges they are faced with. People are hurting, and one of the reasons why people are hurting in Africa is because government aren't fully integrating public policy into public administration. And that's the key thing. That's one of the main problems we face in Africa, the integration of public policy into public administration. So we have the policies, we have the speeches, we have all these things, but for it to translate from policy into administration, that is into implementation, that's where we see another phase of our challenge that we are faced with. So again, we may have good ideas, but until we execute those ideas to the satisfaction of our citizens, then it's just nothing but ideas. It's just nothing but ideas. Um, I want to also draw attention to another question that we need to ask ourselves, when it comes to Africa and public administration. How beneficial, how beneficial are our public policies to our citizens? As we think about policy formation for Africa and how to improve conditions in Africa, this is one of the most essential questions we need to ask ourselves as leaders. How beneficial are our policies to our citizens? Now, and bear in mind now, when we talk about, how beneficial, a policy is only beneficial to a given population, when it is implemented and produce a desired result. Okay, so when asking ourselves how beneficial are our policies to our citizenry, we're literally saying, are these policies sustained? Can it be sustained? And when they implement it, can it be sustained? Can they show tangible result that they are successful, in their implementation? And so these are things we have, we bring to the table and ask ourselves, as we think about Africa, and I would think about, how to turn her around for the betterment of the people. How is this thing working? How can we get it going? Do we have the capacity? Do we have the systems set up to do it? Are we asking ourselves all the questions that we need to ask, before starting the implementation process? Oftentimes, we have the ideas, but we don't go through all the check marks, concerning the implementation, and then we start and we all know where to go. We hit a roadblock. We get to a place that we don't know where to turn because we had a fork in the road. But when you think about public policy, you always think about a two-step process: the formation of the policy and the implementation of the policy. You think about public policy and then you think about public administration. You have to think about these two things. If you're ever going to have a policy implemented that will benefit the citizenry of Africa, that will improve the living conditions of Africans, you have to put those two parts together. Get together with policymakers, form good policies, gets good ideas. What kind of infrastructure we want to build to address issues in our country, to address things impacting our citizens, the health need, the education need, the environment. I mean, have these policies well documented, in play, excellent, that's good. But then look at the second part of it. What kind of administrative system we will need to ensure these policies come to pass, to ensure the citizens see tangible results from these policies? And so I just want you to think about these things as we go through this week, because, again, this is just an intro to public administration. We will have more time to evaluate a little bit more and have others to come on to talk about it. But there's a nugget of truth that I want us to really contemplate on. Especially those of you in the African context, African leaders and policymakers who may be watching this, think through this thing. Not just the policy, but the implementation of it, the administrative system. To give life to this policy is very, very, very essential. And make sure that you have you cross every T and dot every I in terms of examining these administrative systems. Look at the budget, how much it would cost, for these systems to get up and going. How much, what's the staffing needs? Look at all these things. What kind of inventory we need? What kind of equipment do we need? Consider all these factors, so that when you tell the population, the citizens, we have these policies, then you also come and say, we already have put a system in place to make sure these policies work. That's how administration have a legacy. That's how administration improve the conditions of the citizens. That's how administration better the life of their citizens. Not by talking policy, but by implementing the policies. I will check and see what we have some questions to take tonight before we conclude. Obviously, there's no question. Just ponder over what we just said, and as we examine, more on public administration down the road, you may have other questions to come up with. And we have some guests that will speak towards this. But I just want to leave you with that tonight. That in public administration, your policies catch life. In public administration, the people see exactly what you talked about. I have one question that just came in. Let me just read and we answer that. Who within public administration can be the supporter or cheerleader of this initiative? Well, the thing about it, when it comes to the public, the administrative side of the policy, obviously is the leader of the nation, the leadership. That is the president or whoever he has in terms of maybe in Congress, but it's the leadership that spearheads these policies implementation. It starts from the head. It starts from the head. Now, obviously, we know that the head, the president or the leadership, turn it over to a particular agency which is accountable, to the people, to the leader in general. But generally, everything starts with the head. African leaders had to be engaged. African leaders had to be involved in this entire process. Even if you turn something concerning environment to the EPA, you have an oversight committee. You have checks and balance. You have audit. You have evaluation set up to ensure that they are doing the work. So we have the initiative, and that's a good question. But until we have the leadership, the oversight, and again, it starts with the head. We have the oversight in place to make sure these agencies are implementing the objective given to them in the policy. Until we have that, there's potential for abuse, there is potential for to ignore what is expected. There's potential for delays, there's potential for misappropriation. Once there's a lack of oversight, then there's a door that's open, for misuse. So as a leader, as Congress or Parliament or whatever form of leadership system you may have in Africa, when policies are designed and assigned to a particular agency, because of the public interest, these oversight committees or the oversight department, whatever audit system you have set in place, must also be activated to ensure that these agencies carry out their responsibilities. The public have to be the beneficiary of these policies. Is it improving the living condition of the citizens? Is it helping them? Is it beneficial to them? Do we have tangible results that we can measure to show that our people are better with these policies? Do we have a system of audit or evaluation to improve, the services we are providing in these policies? So yes, the leader takes full responsibility for the policies that's implemented within his or her administration, and because you take responsibility, you want to make sure that you have an oversight of each department or each agency, that they are carrying out the policy and the objectives of the policy as described in the framework of the document. That's a very good question. Thank you so much for asking that. Okay, so folks, we just want to, again, this is just an introduction to public administration. We will revisit that as we go on, but just contemplate on this week and share this, with friends and others that that maybe that work within the African sector, the African system of governance. This is how we can contribute to helping Africa be a better place, how we can contribute to helping Africa be more productive, be more accurate in servicing her people, Africa can do better, which is simply does right. And as an organization, we are here to aid with these presentations, as policymakers and as decision makers, come across our side. These are just helpful tools for you in terms of making good policies and implementing these policies to better the life of your citizens and give them a better future. Thank you all again for joining me this afternoon or this evening on AfriH. And again, I will leave you with a motto of our organization: doing better by doing right. Africa can do better if she simply does right. Good night, everybody. See you next week.